What is going on, busy bariatrics? I am Rob, your favorite VSG man turned bariatric coach, here to help you stop white knuckling your way through chicken, broccoli, and dietary meal plans, ditch the burn boot camps that leave you sweaty but still stuck, and finally fix the habits, patterns, and behaviors that got you here in the first place. Today's episode, I am so happy to share with you because my guest is none other than Karen Kenney. Karen is a spiritual mentor, she is a hypnotist, a subconscious reprogrammer, and an all-around just amazing human being that from having her speak in 2 summer camps, I have realized probably knows more about bariatrics than anyone else I know who knows things about bariatrics. And it's because, in her own words, she says, people just people. We're going to talk today about why so many bariatric patients stay locked in this cycle of shame, fear, or perfectionism loops. And Karen's really going to walk us through how she views those loops, how to start to rewrite them, and also thrive after weight loss surgery. But before we get into it, please do me a quick favor, because we actually did the research. Nobody listens to the end of these episodes, so I'm putting it right at the beginning. If you think this podcast is going to help you, screenshot the episode, share it to your Instagram story, or share it with a friend. You can tag me at My Weight is History or tag Karen at Karen Kenney and let us know if any of this lands with you. So with that in mind, let's get gritty, let's get honest, and let's get busy. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. It's so exciting to be here, and it's always a pleasure, and we always have so much fun. And just thank you for inviting me. I always love talking to you and your community.
Yeah, it's really become like one of the best points of summer camp is having you come in, because as of this recording, you have done both summer camps, and every time it causes this huge awesome buzz within our community for the rest of the week of like, well, Karen said this, Karen did this. And do you remember how Karen was explaining we should be looking at this? So I wanted to bring you on the show because I have to tell you, for someone who is not traditionally like geared with their profession for the bariatric community, you understand the bariatric community so well. And I think part of the reason is because you really listen and you ask the right question. So I'm going to start there with how did you become such a great listener? Because I'm always impressed.
Oh my God, that is so sweet. I think first of all that listening is a skill that we can all learn and we can all get better at. I think most of us basically listen to respond, meaning we just sit there and wait for the other person to stop talking so then we can share our point of view. Like we don't give a shit. We're not listening to what the other person is saying. And it might be, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, it might be that a part of me has always wanted to be deeply understood. And I think I have felt that I've been really misunderstood a lot throughout my life. And when you want to be heard and understood, I think one of the first and best ways we can do is to start to really pay attention and lean in and listen. And I think also part of what makes me a better listener, because I wasn't probably always the best listener, but I think I'm pretty wicked good now. I'm always trying to get better, is that I am genuinely curious about people. Like I care about people and I'm really curious about them. So I want to hear what they have to say. I want to know why they think what they think and believe what they believe and do what they do. And so getting to hear people's stories and ask questions that I actually care about the answer to is just that. To me, what's the point? Like I don't understand the point. Like somebody was just saying to me yesterday how like you bump into somebody at the grocery store and they say, how you doing? But they don't really want the answer. I actually want the answer. Like I want the honest answer, because they're like, we just ask those as pleasantries because what are you going to do? The person said to me, what are you going to do? Just stop and just like unload all your stuff on them? And I said, I don't know, like it happens to me in the grocery store all the time. So, but I do. I think it's, again, curiosity because I care, and probably my own desire to also be understood.
I think I would 100% agree, because I feel like if there was ever anyone who would ask me, how you doing? And I would feel comfortable, you always have this presence about you where I almost feel like one level safer, if that makes sense, because I know you're listening and I know that you are actually like listening to understand. And I think I actually would give you the full answer of how I'm doing as opposed to the good that I give everyone else. And I think that's a testament to you.
That's really kind of you to say, and it means a lot to me. I mean, I think that paying attention is one of the ways that we show love. And I think sometimes people keep it surfacey. They don't want to go much deeper because they sometimes are like, they already feel overwhelmed in their own life. There's already so much going on in their own life. They don't have the bandwidth to deal with other people's trauma and drama and stuff like that. Sometimes they just feel unequipped. They're like, I don't even know what to say. Like, especially like, just for an example, like around grief, like people just honestly are usually like, I don't know what to say when somebody tells me something really honest about their feelings. And we're not always taught how to navigate our feelings, which is so interesting because I think part of what happens for a lot of people is they end up eating their feelings or drinking their feelings or gambling their feelings or whatever their feelings, right? Shopping, Netflixing, doom scrolling,
All of the above.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I think it's one of those things where, I don't, it's not that I can't do small talk, but I am really interested on what's going on. I always say under, like what's going on inside of a person. It matters, people's feelings matter and their experience matters. And so being able to truly listen, to another human being is a sacred act, and to really care about what's saying. And I'm also, because of my profession, right, just my nature, first of all, I'm just a wicked curious kid, but underneath that, as a spiritual, as a coach, as all these other things, I'm also listening for what's not being said. Because a lot of times people are doing things with their body, right? Like they're doing things with their eyes, their mouth, their face, their body language. Their mouth is saying one thing, but their body is telling me something totally different. So I just tend to ask a lot of questions and kind of lean into like, so what they're not telling me also. Does that make sense?
It 100% does, because I think, wow, there's like so many things I want to touch upon with what you said. I think for bariatrics, something that really we struggle with is getting deeper than that emotional or that surface level of everything. So even when I'm at bariatric events, I feel like people almost always open up with how much weight they've lost, as well as like where they are in their process, because it almost gives like an identifier, if that makes sense. When you're like, something I'm always proudest of is you really do help people rewrite their stories or understand their stories. When it comes from that, how did that start for you, and what made you realize like that's the big work that we have to do?
Well, I mean, part of my own story is that, I always say there's like, I often talk to people about like, well, what's their big headline story? So if the newspaper was going to tell one story about you, like, what are they going to tell? And almost always people will say, if it's okay, will you talk about your mom and that story? And I'm like, my story started way before she died. So there's like a lot. And I'm like, that's why I'm writing a book. I'm like, when the memoir comes out, everybody could read the fuller story. But, the short story is my mother and my biological father were divorced when I was 2. And then my mother got together with who became my stepfather, and they fought like nonstop all the time. We were blue collar poor kids from Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's a little city 30 miles north of Boston. And, my mother, during one of the times, they fought all the time. They got separated all the time. And during one of the times that they were separated, my mother went out one night and did not come home. My mother was murdered. She was beaten to death. And I was 12 years old. And my sister was, she was 13 going on 14. There's a certain story that happens, there's a certain story you start telling yourself when something like that happens. And part of the story is the world isn't safe, right? That I don't matter. My stepfather didn't want us. I ended up going to live with an aunt and uncle who were strangers to me. I was on my own from 17 on, blah, 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 blah. So all these events and stuff. So basically the stories that we tell come from initially the experiences that we have, the events that we have, the environments that we grew up in. And those events and experiences and that environment starts to inform the things that we think, right? The things that we believe. So we have these interpretations and meanings that we assign to those things. Those interpretations and meanings might be like, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. My parents got divorced because I was this, or I wasn't that, or whatever. And little kids don't, until they hit a certain age, their brains literally are not developed in a way where they can do kind of like what I call critical thinking, which is understand, well, the problem was in their marriage or in the world. It had nothing to do with me. I was just a little kid. But we don't know that. All we know is because little kids are very self-centric, not in a selfish way, but we don't have the ability to see beyond like, it must be me, I wasn't good enough or whatever. And then those meanings and interpretations that we assign to those events, you know, they become our beliefs. And those things we start to believe about ourselves are the stories we start to tell about ourselves. And then those stories told often enough become the identity. And the identity piece is another reason I think that a lot of bariatric people struggle with, because they're making an external physical change, but the internal, the beliefs, the stories and stuff have not caught up yet to the surgery or to the weight loss. So they have this, this struggle. And so if we don't get to the root of the stories, and that's why I call the process that I kind of use, you know, it's a little different for everybody, but the heartbeat is the same, which is your story to your glory. And so a lot of times people will tell me, they'll tell me the facts and the events of a thing, the story. And I'm always like, but what did that mean to you? Like, what was the meaning that you assigned to your parents' divorce, your mother's murder, this betrayal, this relationship, whatever? Because we're basically walking around, and I always say everything that you're doing or not doing is because of a story or an identity that you've created about who you think you are or how you're supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Oh my goodness! Now I'm like pausing back because I want to jump in and end on all of this, but this is why I always love having you, because if anyone wants to like get this daily, your podcast really does show the idea of how do you go from your story to your glory. And just what you said about bariatrics, I think is important, because when we work with clients or when I meet members of the community or I'm out in the community, so much of where they struggle with is these events in their past that they have either not come to terms with or have really just resurfaced now. That really, when I say like, well, when did your relationship with food start? And it's like childhood. So how do you learn to like dig deep or start to address those sort of things? Because that's not an easy task you do in the grocery store with a how you doing conversation.
Well, no. And I think that so often, you know, so much of also the things that we do, the things that we believe, the things that we think and we say, they're so deeply subconscious. You know, from the time that we're literally in the third trimester, still in our mother's womb, until we're about 8 years old. You know, I think it was Aristotle, one of the Stoics, has this saying where he says, you know, give me the boy, give me the child until they are 8. And we'll just say boy in this case. Give me the boy until he is 8, and I will show you the man. Because we are so deeply programmed as children. Anybody here who has ever uttered as an adult, you know, we can't afford that, or money doesn't grow on trees, or money's the root of all evil, literally, it has to do with certain brainwave states. It has to do with patterns and conditioning in our childhood, even relationships with food. If you saw, you come from an Italian family, yes?
Of course. Yeah, let's go there.
What's one of the main ways that the women in your family show love?
Food. It's absolutely food.
Comfort, right? You don't feel good, give them a snack. I remember my own nana. So I'm an Irish kid, but my step family was Italian and Portuguese. So I always say, like, I'm an Irish kid with like these crazy Italians and Portuguese around me. And my nana was like, you know, it was like making this and the pasta fazool and getting the thing and here's the whatever, and like food and booze too, like food and drink and like all the stuff that comes from that. Okay. So our relationships to things, how we make sense of things, it starts when we're very young. And it's like the different brainwave states, right? There's like beta and alpha and theta and delta. Little kids are almost always in kind of like that more alpha and theta state where they are highly suggestible. So as a hypnotist, it's like, it is literally like just hitting, like when we were kids, I'm older than you, but when we were kids, we had those big tape decks where you could just hit the record button and the tape
deck. Okay, credit on that one, Karen. Come on.
Okay. So that's what it's like being a little kid, is you're taking in everything your parents are saying. You're taking in, this is how we learn to do relationships. This is how we relate to ourselves, to each other, to the world, to food, to exercise, to whatever, right? And so then we get all this conditioning and programming. It's in our subconscious. And the thing that I often tell clients when I work with them one-to-one and even in my group or whatever is that, you know, we are 95 to 97, whatever, maybe it's 93 to 97. I don't know the exact thing, but of everything we think, say, and do comes from our subconscious. So we're all, have you ever been like, I don't know why I did that. Like, why am I doing that? What was I thinking when I did that? And I often say to them, you weren't thinking. You were in your hypnosis. And I say part of what I do with hypnosis is I de-hypnotize people because you're already hypnotized. You're hypnotized by your past. You're hypnotized by yourself. So how do we start to get underneath that? Well, look there's a gazillion resources. And I always say, even if you're dead broke, thank God for libraries because library cards are free and there are resources there too. Books, podcasts, coaches, people like coaches and mentors. I'm pointing at the both of us.
Yeah, we're both doing this.
Yeah, coaches, mentors, programs, communities, like, and you have to, and the thing is though, is you have to find a place where your nervous system feels safe enough for you to want to tell your story or be vulnerable or get honest or peel back the layers. Because as I was saying to you earlier, safe doesn't always feel safe. Being open and vulnerable for most people keep it on the surface level because it doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable. It doesn't feel safe to let another person see your wounds or tell those stories. For us to heal, I always say healing doesn't happen in the past. It happens in the present moment, but we have to be able to look at a few things. Doesn't mean we have to go back and drag every body out. We don't have to go spend a ton of time there. But we do have to take a look at a few things so that we can now choose who and how we want to be going forward. And I always say to people, because they're like, oh, I know. I'm like, no, you don't know. You understand, but you don't know because you're not doing it. And Lao Tzu has this great quote. He says, to know and not yet do is to not yet know.
There is so much truth in that and just such a beautiful quote. But no, I forget if this is even when we record or this is just what we're talking about, but we keep kind of returning to this word safe. And I think in the bariatric community, that is a very difficult word because I just wrote on my notepad prior to when we were starting was the phrase, safe doesn't feel safe when it's uncertain. And we were talking about how, as of this recording, I'm trying to get a little bit less busy and a little bit more present and how that's scary for me. For bariatric patients, we really are in an uncertain level of what does our lifestyle look like? What is our nutrition, fitness, like our relationships with people? We have a lot of uncertainty coming around us. So if we're feeling unsafe, how do we start to break that down or feel safe, I guess?
Yeah. So, it's helpful to start with the number one question that your nervous system is always asking is, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And the reality of it is, take a look around at the world that we live in. There's a certain amount of reality where it's like, this is not a safe world. It's not a safe world for different groups of people. It's not a safe world. There's so much violence. There's so much division. There's so much. So it's not like our nervous system is usually cruising around like everything is awesome. Like my past was awesome. All my choices were great. My relationships were amazing. So in order for us, I always say, waiting to take action or to make better choices until we feel safe is not going to happen. So my work is how can we feel safe enough to do what we came here to do? And so the nervous system wants to feel safety, but the brain keeps us safe, Rob. And here's where it's wicked hard. This is why so much change is wicked hard for people. The way that the brain keeps you safe is by keeping you in the familiar. It wants to save time. It wants to save you. It wants to be efficient. So I always say the brain will always choose an unsafe known versus a safe unknown. I'll say that again, right? The brain is always going to choose unsafe known versus a safe unknown. So that uncertainty can be really scary, like you're saying. So people, I'm assuming, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, in the bariatric community, you have done things a very particular way for a really long time. And I always say to my client, your best thinking got you here. Mm-hmm. So now we want to try something new, like just a tiny bit of willingness goes a long way.
Karen, I'm going to fill my legal pad with everything. Okay. And I hope everyone listens to this episode 3 times over. Sorry, keep going.
No, it's okay. So it's Your best thinking got you here. So what felt safe to you before is now no longer working, because as little kids and as teenagers, etc., we develop these survival strategies, these survival mechanisms that we put in place, right, to kind of navigate the world. And whether it's a trauma response of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or patterns or behaviors that you created, or you use food to comfort yourself, you use, like, think about this, right? There's so much we can't control, but what are some of the things we can control? What we're putting in our mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So when things start to feel really scary, right, we tend to do, like, it's like, how can I take control? For some people, it's cleaning, right? They start to develop other kinds of obsessive tendencies or addictive tendencies. For some people, it's food. For some people, like I said earlier, it's booze, it's whatever. So a lot of times when we start to feel unsafe, we go to what's familiar. Well, what's familiar? I mean, my stepfather was a Wonder Bread man. And I always say we didn't always have good food in the house, but there was probably a damn pack of Twinkies in the cupboard. You know what I mean? I was a chubby little kid. I was a chubby kid. I was like shoving ho-hos and Twinkies and Suzy Q's and everything like in my face, So these patterns of behavior are like start to feel safe. Then you realize, for whatever reason, you just decide, a person decides, I want to make a change. They start to become aware of the pattern. Or the doctor says to them, if you don't lose this weight, you're going to die. Your kids aren't going to see, you're not going to see your kids get married, or X, Y, and Z. Do you want to end up like your father? Whatever is said to them. And there's a moment where I'm like the door opens and something gets in. Something gets in, and it's like a come to Jesus or a holy shit or whatever moment. And it's like, okay, I got to do something different. And so then I'm assuming, right, from what I understand, there's certain parameters before you have the surgery, which you have to be at a certain weight or something like that, right? Or you have to do certain things before you can get the surgery.
It depends on the practice and everyone else. There are some people who are like, yeah, we'll do it like next Thursday if you have the cash or if the insurance covers it. Yeah, it's better programs, I will say, have some bit of psychological eval, but because of how that's a whole political.
Well, that was my next question.
Oh,
that was my next question, is that from what I understand, that time in the psychology of why are you doing this thing is not very extensive.
No.
Okay, so this is my point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who have been doing like familiar. A little bit of comes into the brain. We're going to do something different. And even that can be like, okay, I'm just going to lose this weight. I'm going to do whatever I can do so I can get this surgery, so I can make this change. So a lot of times people are changing the outside, but the inside is not caught up yet. So they're trying to live a new way and follow their coach's workouts and go to the gym where they're going to get caught in a comparison loop of hell probably, and feel awkward and feel weird. And I have to put on what clothes and go there, and people are going to be looking at me, and I'm going to feel stupid, or I'm going to be embarrassed, and I don't know how to use the machine. And oh my God, I can imagine how completely overwhelming it is. And again, they're trying to take all this action when I think of it like a four-leg table, right? You have the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. The physical tends to change first, and then these other aspects have to now catch up. But the emotions are not like the mental and the emotional, never mind the spiritual, are usually lagging a little bit behind. And it's like, I don't know how to talk about my feelings. I don't know how to explain why I did what I like. Do you know what I'm saying? So thank God for programs like yours, where you're really trying to, from your own experience of being in that coaching bariatric world and not getting what you thought you probably needed, and then being empathetic and compassionate enough and also smart enough to realize that there's a gap in there and that you could be helpful, but it's also like good business. But you're basically getting people who desperately wanted to make a change, did something. I mean, getting cut open, anytime you're getting a surgery, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So it means enough to people to make the change, but other parts haven't caught up to the physical part of it yet. So there's coaches, there's therapy, there's mentors, there's a lot of resources, but mostly it comes down to tools of safety. And how do I break these patterns and these habits and these ways of being and thinking that I've been doing for a really long time? And when you start to try to change your identity, because remember, everything you're thinking and doing is an extension of that identity. When you try to start to change, what happens is there's something that's called disintegration anxiety, where the old you is now starting to fall away. And people are like, who am I without those old habits? Who am I without those old patterns? Like, I don't even know who I am without that old story. So we don't have enough time on this podcast to probably go into like all the things that are going on within a person when they're trying to make really big changes. But there's certain tools like EFT tapping and bilateral stimulation and havening techniques and things that people can do, breathing techniques, very simple one. When you start to get like a little overwhelmed, like your coach sends, the program for the week and you're like, Jesus, I don't have the time. When am I going to do this? Because all the excuses will start coming in, right? I don't have enough time. I don't know how to do this. I left my sneakers over there, like da da da. And it's like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling out of my comfort zone. What's something that I can do? In my work, we call them pattern interrupts, right? How can I interrupt this pattern of overwhelm or whatever, this feeling of like, oh my God. And so we have a lot of different tools to help people come back to get out of anxiety, come back to a sense of safety. And they're energy psychology tools, but they're also like acupressure. There's soothing techniques. There's all kinds of things. But with the breath, simplest thing, breathe in deep through your nose, fully, 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 fully deeply. Exhale through your mouth twice as long, making a little bit of sound. I always say use like the F sound, first of all, because that makes me laugh, right? So go like
Always use the F.
Big breath into your nose and then twice as long. Do that several times. It starts to slow down the heart. It starts to bring ourselves back into a slow down pace. But breathing doesn't work for everybody. Some people need tapping. Some people need different tools. And I think that I always say to my clients, you think you should know how to do all this, but whoever taught us? Who taught us about nutrition as kids? Who taught us about self-love and self-worth as kids? Who taught us tools when we were scared? No, the motto when we grew up is like, I always say, like, it was about sucking it up and stuffing it down and feeling the fear and doing it anyways. I'm like, that doesn't work anymore. We're paying the price now as adults for the lack of tools that we didn't have when we were younger,
Yeah, no, and there's so much there that I think is difficult after bariatric surgery because you're in this unknown space. It does feel unsafe. It's tough to connect, I think, with you can get
Say more about that. It's tough to connect.
So I think connection on the topical level is pretty easy to do, but to find people in either your first physical space, like like how they talk about first space is the home, second space is work, and then finding a third space. I don't know how many people find either in their first space of their home or their second place of work who've had bariatric surgery. So not only are you trying to find like this third space, but then finding a third space of people who get it and then who can also share and kind of go with that. Does that make sense?
It does. The tiniest tweak, and again, because I'm a spiritual mentor, I can't help it. The tiniest tweak I would make to that is I think that the first space is the self.
Yeah.
Finding that first space with you with you, and then you with the divine, whatever you might call that thing, whether you call it God, source, love, universe, higher power, highest self. I don't get hung up on the word love. You with you is the first space. Then the family is the second space. And then as you think of it like concentric circles, right? As you go out. But I think that's why you and your community, which, I'm not in your community, but I'm adjacent to your community. I touch base with your community and I can see how much support and love is in that community, but somebody also has to go first. Like somebody has to be brave enough to start getting real honest, in different programs. I'm a non-drinker. I'm not quote unquote sober, as they would say, meaning because I never had a problem with alcohol, but I know a lot about the 12-step community and stuff like that. But where was I just going with that? Oh my gosh. What were we just saying? What were we just talking about? What was the thing I said right before that? Do you know?
Just the feeling safe, but also finding community or finding a place where there's other people who get it.
Oh, no, I know what I was going to say. It was about being brave and going first. So there's a step where it says you have to take a fearless moral inventory. A fearless moral inventory. And it's about really getting honest between you and, I always say, the God of your own understanding, the whatever you call that, higher self, higher power, doesn't even you don't even have to be religious or whatever. Spirituality is a path of the heart, right? So it's like getting really taking a look and asking yourself, why did I do what I do? Da, 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 da. And it's really easy to say things like, well, I did that. It goes back to storytelling. I did that because my mother was murdered. I did that because I had to X, Y, and D. I did that because this happened to me. And at some point, I'm not saying that that's not true. At some point, we can be victims. As little kids, we are victimized because we have no power. We have no agency, authorship, or autonomy. We are told when to go to bed, what to eat, what to wear, da, 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 da. Things can happen to us as children. People can rape you. People can harm you physically. People can do things, hurt you, kill you, whatever. So there are true victims in the world. But a lot of times we're staying trapped in a victim loop of our own making because we're continuing to tell the story of our own powerlessness when that's no longer the case. And what I'll often say is, so many people come from trauma histories, and I'll say, trauma explains a lot of things. It can help me to understand why somebody did something. Like, trauma explains a lot of things, but trauma doesn't excuse everything. So at some point as adults, we have to really understand that we are the authors of our own stories. We are telling our own stories all the time, and we should write well and edit often, because a lot of the stuff that we say is not serving us anymore.
I'm like writing and getting everything because just always impressive, like, to kind of hear how this works and goes, because what you said about trauma, Karen, I think is so true, because in my professional opinion and from working with now I'm over 100 clients in my career, which is weird, but like from hundreds of clients, talking in the community with hundreds of people, going to these events, there's very few people who say, I'm getting to 365 pounds because I really like the dollar menu at McDonald's. I think that might be the surface level of I'm a foodie or I like everything. But when I really start to dig deep and ask and learn and understand, I realize that, like, there is a level of trauma that kind of causes us to, soothe with food, right? Yeah.
Percent. And that's the piece. This kind of like the table, right? The physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. Have you ever eaten at a restaurant where the table leg is short on one side and everything's just like kunk, 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 and your drink keeps spilling, and like
we just call that a Jersey diner. That's a true Jersey diner. No four legs of a Jersey diner actually all work, or it's bolted down and you can't move anything. Those are the only two things.
Okay, but imagine that's your life.
Oh my God, that'd be terrible. I could not do that.
It's unwobbly because one of those legs is too short. It hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been dealt with. Or it's bolted to the floor, because that's how it is in this family. And we don't talk about shit outside of this house. And we take a pact of silence because we're not going to talk about our trauma and what Uncle Leo did that friggin' Thanksgiving, and how your father used to abuse you, but your mother turned a blind eye, and you were shamed. There's so much shame, I think. I think there's so much shame that happens in the bariatric community, and people don't have unshaming tools. They've never had an unshaming witness to bear witness to them, to say, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, to get to the root of what created this desire to use food as comfort. And this is what's so interesting. When you look at when you look at a lot of addictive behaviors, to the people on the outside, they're like, oh, the gambling was the problem. The booze was the problem. The food was the problem, right? But to the one who's doing it, you're shaking your head. You already know what I'm going to say.
If anyone's watching on YouTube, I look like a bobblehead doll because I know where this is going and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And to the person doing the behavior, whether it's eating, gambling, shopping, sex, whatever it is, it's the solution. It's the solution. So if the habit or the pattern that is destructive in some way is the solution to the problem, we have to get to the root of what the fucking problem was. What's the problem? The suffering, the sadness, the despair, the anxiety, the lack of self-worth, self-love, whatever it is, and that's the thing. Most people, when I speak and stuff, I often say, I always think it's fascinating because whenever you're introduced on stage or on a thing, the way that they introduce you is, and she's a spiritual mentor, and she's this, and she's done this, or whatever.
You may have just gotten one at the beginning of this episode.
Oh, yeah, perfect. No, but what I'm saying is that's where they start. But that's not where, the real meat of it is, well, let me take you down into the valley of my despair. Wasn't born there. Wasn't born there. Here's part of the story. Then we get down into that valley, or it's sometimes called the dip. But in the dip is where people are most going to relate to you. It's why at AA meetings or any kind of meeting, when somebody stands up and they say, hey, I'm Joe. Hey, Joe. I'm like, oh, yeah. And they tell their story and people nod their heads because they know what it's like to go through the drive-through and get 3 burgers and 2 fries and eat them in the car before you get home. So nobody knows because you're racked with shame and everybody's like, yeah. But we don't want to stay down there. That's where people will relate and say yes. But then we have to make the ascent. We have to come out, and that's where the tools are. That's where the support is. That's where the community is. So it's easy to go to a bariatric retreat or community or workshop because you're going to say, I lost 160 pounds. I lost 3. And people are going to go wild. And they're going to be like, oh my God, if you can do it, I can do it. And that's so inspiring. And look at you. I'm like, why? They probably don't want to have the workshop of where it all began because nobody wants to sit in a room listening to all the trauma. But that work has to be addressed on some level, or the patterns of behavior will continue. I am sure that you see in the bariatric world people who get the surgery and then lose weight but gain it all back, or X, Y, and Z.
Most of the data shows that almost every bariatric patient will experience some form of regain within their first 7 years. The research and data, and I don't have it off the top of my head, so I'm going to look up and think of it. You don't hit less than a double-digit chance of maintaining your weight loss till you hit 7 years. Which means your first 7 years, I always say, is like a 7-year street fight. You really have to do everything we're saying, figure out what's going on, and heal your relationship with self to have that long-term success.
Yes. So you say it's a street fight.
Yeah.
And so my follow-up would be, so who are they fighting?
Oh, I guess that's really the deep question. This is why I love talking to you, Karen, because for me, I think it's that really is.
I mean, I have my own thoughts, but what do you think?
I've always said 7-year street fight. I guess for me, it was fighting my old habits, patterns, and behaviors, and my limiting beliefs, and my beliefs around food. How do I soothe? How do I live? What do I do to celebrate? How do I have relationships when they're not around food? To me, it's almost like you have to break out all of your old relationships with food and then really work on what you want it to look like afterwards. So it's not just fighting, but it's rebuilding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think we are deeply patterned and conditioned. We have to basically do pattern interrupts to reestablish so we can literally create new neural networks in your brain, because every time you ate a food and it was yummy and the brain lit up, that was a little neural pathway that was woohoo. That pathway, every time that pathway is run, that's why people who are quick to get angry, they've gotten angry enough times that now it's wicked easy to get angry, because that neural network has fired so many times that they don't even have to think about it. It's just boom, quick temper.
Really?
Yes. You're firing a pattern and a habit. Everything we're doing, when you first learned to tie your shoes or ride a bike, it took a certain number of times before the brain and the body got on board. But that's why they say, get back on the bike. You never forget how to ride a bike, because when did we learn how to ride a bike, Rob?
I like 6, 7 in our childhood, before 8, going back to Aristotle. So see, this is why I love talking with you, because like we go down these roads, but then it's like, oh wait, we're still in the same neighborhood because I just saw that street sign.
When people be peopling, we're always in the same neighborhood. So we basically have these patterns and habits that are unquestioned because they're unconscious. And this is one of the things I always say to people. I'm not giving people a pass to make excuses, but I don't want people to think I'm bad because it's like, no, you're just deeply patterned. Because people will often be like, I'm fucked up, broken, I'm a mess. And I'm like, no, you're just deeply patterned and habituated. You were conditioned. So now we need some tools to decondition the patterns and the habits and have a new way of being. But you're not just fighting the old self. You're resisting the new you. You're resisting the workout plan. You're resisting the drink a bunch of water. You're resisting the macros and the weighing of the food. And what's this gross protein powder? I want food. And it's not like, you're resisting all the newness as well. So like you're kind of in no man's land going like, oh my God, these old things aren't working and I'm terrified of the new stuff and I don't even like it. And I always say to my clients, at some point, you're going to get mad at me. I'm going to annoy you. You're not going to like me because I'm now going to be the face of your suffering because I'm asking you to do things that feel deeply uncomfortable or whatever. So again, having tools that interrupt the patterns that help the nervous system feel a little more safety. And what I always say too is that, and I'll just share with you because you're a fellow coach and mentor to people, a lot of coaches will say, and I create a safe space for you. And I always say, and I used to say that too. And I said, I don't say that anymore because I'm not the one determining whether or not my container is safe. Them and their nervous system is going to decide. They're going to decide if this is a safe place where they can be vulnerable. All I can do is do my best to create an environment where they don't feel judged, where they feel seen, where they feel welcomed, where they feel like this is a friendly group of people who want to help me, who are going to hold me accountable also, because that's part of love. It's not saying, oh, you blew it, like, murr, murr, murr. And, you know, it's like, I always say loving but firm, because it's not loving for me to just listen to your bullshit stories about how you keep self-sabotaging. Like, that's not loving either, right? So it's about like finding that balance. But first and foremost, the greatest work is people with themselves, is kind of reconciling and healing that relationship with themselves, because the hardest critic is the inner critic, the voice of that inner critic voice, which a lot of times it wasn't even ours to begin with. It started with an overbearing parent or a bully at school or a teacher or a sibling or whoever. And then many years later, that person could even be dead. And we're still hitting that tape recorder. We're hitting the play button and we're hearing it. And so my biggest thing is I just want people to have enough freedom so that they can choose, so they're not like caught in their addiction or caught in their pattern or caught in their habit or making choices unconsciously. I want them to be able to have the agency and the authorship to write the stories that really reflect who they are and who they want to be in the world. And so many of the people you work with are incredibly brave. They're incredibly courageous. They really are trying to make a big change. And sometimes it's just, you just have to, like I said, surgery is like one of the steps, but if we can address the physical, we can write a program, we can do all that. But if we don't get under the hood, if we don't get into the emotional and the mental and the spiritual, it's going to be that wonky table bumping us out, from a good experience.
It's so true. And it's just like, wow. I'm almost dumbfounded in the way that it just all comes together, because I think as coaches, we do hold space, like especially in one-to-one coaching. I think that is a really powerful space.
Yeah,
but I think even there is a lot of truth in what you said, and how I also believe in philosophically of coaching, of I do not necessarily want to be a cheerleader, because I think like there is enough cheerleading that goes on. But like one of the first rules we say in Busy Bariatrics is we don't sit in our issues, meaning we kind of speak our truth, but then we also find actionable ways to get out of that. And I think the first step of getting out of your own way is admitting you have to be vulnerable. And I think that's a really tough place to start with. If a client's struggling with being vulnerable, like, how do you start to open that conversation with them? Because that's not really an easy space to begin, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, the thing is that people won't be vulnerable or show you their cards or show you their heart, if there's no trust involved.
Yeah.
And you can't make people trust you, and in marketing and in business, they talk about that whole but we don't determine whether or not they trust us yet. And that's the thing. When you have a hypervigilant nervous system that does not see safety anywhere, but is looking for safety and wants to experience safety, all we can do is sometimes it's we have to model it, we have to mirror it. But it's not about you just as the coach, dumping all your trauma or your community, whatever. But over time, with enough exposure, that's why, have you ever, how sometimes people like to watch the same TV shows or the same movies over and over and over again? Okay.
My brother with Law and Order.
The reason why we do that is, number one, the brain likes what's familiar.
Yeah.
What's familiar is easy. It saves time. We already know what's going to happen. And our nervous system is oh, there's no surprises here. I know what's going to happen. I feel safe watching Friends for the 8,000th time, or for me watching Good Will Hunting. I'm I know these people. I know this story. I know how this goes, right? And this is why I talk about communities. And I was just saying it to my yoga students the other night. I said, the thing about committing to a practice, the thing about committing to showing up and making your spiritual practice or your yoga, whatever practice, a priority. One of the benefits, the secret benefits that nobody ever talks about, is when you come into the room, or for you guys, the Zoom call, right? When you all see each other, or the Slack channel, or the community, however you guys are communicating, their nervous system automatically gets when they see Stacy 1,000 times a day and they see the video, they see the same people and they hear the stories and whatever. So trust is something that grows slowly over time. Some people are willing to just trust faster than others. So part of it is the vulnerability has to do with intimacy. And what a lot of people do is they mistake intimacy with information. But information doesn't heal. Information, you can have all the information, you read the books, you listened to the thing, that information doesn't heal. It's the intimacy with that information or with that community or with that coach that allows you and your nervous system to start to be able, because have you ever been in fight or flight?
Yes, literally. A bunch of
Okay. So when your amygdala starts to fire and you're in fight or flight and you're in panic, do you do your best thinking?
Oh God, no. I fight. I'm preset to fight because
sure.
I think because as used to being 365 pounds, it's I know I can't run. So I was almost predetermined to, no, I'll fight my way out of any situation because I can at least stand a chance of that as opposed to running away.
Right. So it's we have these, so when your brain, I say when your reptilian brain goes into survival mode, which is what all the 4 F's of trauma, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, when we go into that thing, the prefrontal cortex, where you do your most best thinking, it shuts off. It's you're not, when people, I've said that before, when people are what was I thinking? I'm you weren't thinking. Your creative thinking was not available to you. So if what the next best step might be is not available to you, what do you fall back on? The thing that you know. Those subconscious patterns and habits. So if somebody wants to come into a group and start to be a little more vulnerable and develop trust, I always say, my friend Linda Tai, who's a brilliant trauma therapist, I've had her on my show several times. She talks about it. She'll say, sip, sip. We don't want to guzzle. We don't want to come in and just drop our trauma story, but maybe you just share a little something and your nervous system realizes, oh, I shared and I was vulnerable. And I had unshaming witnesses. I had people who were supportive. I survived that. My nervous system is now, new neural network, new neural network. I can share a little something. I can be vulnerable and I didn't die. Because that's what we really feel like. We feel like we're going to die, right? It's I'm too afraid. People, I'm sure, sit on a Zoom call, and I'm just making this up, but let's say you were going to call on everybody and their hearts are pounding 20 people ahead of them. Do you know what I'm saying? And they're not in their right mind. They're not listening to what anybody's saying because they're thinking about what they're going to say because they're in fight and flight mode. Even if they're excited, a lot of people's bodies don't know the difference between excitement and fear. So they're like shutting down. So how does one do it? You try to find a safe enough community or coach or whatever. And then you just sip, take a little sip, start testing the waters. You start to build, like any other muscle, you got to build it.
Yeah, it's, I'm sitting here in awe and everything else. I think some of the most interesting things of having a community call is just having a space in there to kind of allow people to talk and maybe not even like have to guide it. Just, I know as a coach myself, I struggle because when you have a large group, you want to make sure that it ebbs and flows and goes everywhere. But I think a lot of the times as coaches, we almost have to step back and allow them to kind of cross-pollinate with each other when they go through that.
Well, I mean, a lot of people, because your community is very specific.
Yeah.
Even though some might be men, some might be women, some might be others, some might be whatever. But in general, they're dealing with a very niche or similar problem. Do you know what I'm saying? So when they talk, they can often relate to the first time after surgery they had to X, Y, and Z, or when they got that first program from you and they were like, what? And they're like, counting macros sucks or whatever. So allowing them to support each other in whatever. In my case, it's slightly different because people come to me for a lot of different reasons. You know what I mean? So I tend to, it's not that I don't let them talk to each other, but how do I say this? A lot of times people could possibly give advice or say things that I don't stand behind. So I don't really let them crosstalk on a call, just me personally. They can crosstalk in the group. They can share their experiences in the group. But sometimes people have opinions, but they don't have the skill set to hold a space for somebody when they've shared something vulnerable. So I'm not saying you do this where you just let everything run wild.
Oh, no. But that's the conflict I have in my sessions as well, because it's that I want to make sure that we are staying aligned of what we believe. But at the same time, you do want to have a safe space where they communicate. So it's like, that's such a fine tightrope to balance.
It is. It's a balancing act of community participation, not having like somebody comes in and says something and you're like, absolutely not. Like in your brain, you're like, oh my God, that's not helpful. It might actually be harmful. Like, how do I backtrack that? Whatever. So it is a delicate balance because you are the leader. Even though you have support staff and other coaches who are brilliant and beautiful human beings and they're amazing. And I'm not even talking about them, but I'm just saying, even though you have it, like
they are, though. I'll go on the record of saying you're 100% right. My team is pretty awesome.
Believe that. I believe that they are awesome. And it's your face at the end of the day. It's your business at the end of the day. So like you're responsible for the shenanigans or whatever that goes on in the thing. So it is tough. And anytime you're in a health, and here's the other thing, we're human. We're gonna screw up. We're not always gonna say it the right way with the right tone of voice, with the right exact thing. We also have to have a little tenderness and mercy, forgiveness and compassion for ourselves because we got into this work because we wanted to be helpful, but we're not gods. We're not omnipotent. We don't know everything all the time. You know what I mean? So there's going to be times when maybe we flub up or make a mistake, and thank God for being able to say I'm sorry or make amends or come correct or fix it.
It's funny because as I get further on in my coaching career, I look at it the same way as like my teaching career, really any aspect of life. Like so much of this, I'm a better person now than I was before because I'm learning and growing, and even learning to apologize or say anything just makes me a better person. And I think when you reflect on that and then kind of understand like you're only as good as you can be at that very moment, and the goal should always be to be better for the next time around. I just think it's a great spot to be.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I did a whole podcast once on regret, and it says regret is focusing too much on the mistakes you made while you were still learning.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, look, I maybe flubbed this up, but I'm going to do my best to do better next time. And The other thing to keep in mind too is that, and just from a coaching perspective, is I always say, but it's also helpful for people to think about this and apply it to themselves. A person can only be as good in your presence as they first are in your mind.
Wow.
So for me as a coach, I'm not meeting them down in that pit, in that valley. Like, I'm going to meet them where they are. Like, I'm going to be like, oh, I understand where you are. But it's not helpful for me to join them down there in their suffering. I need to be outside the hole saying, here are some tools. Like, I'm going to lift you up. It's not that I don't have compassion and I don't understand, but it's like, but people also have to keep in mind that they can only be as good in their own presence as they first are in their own minds. So if we keep telling those old bullshit stories of how I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'll never figure it out, I can't count macros, I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, it's like you're already cutting yourself off at the knees. It's like, start to ask yourself these questions. I just did a podcast on this week. And by the time people hear this, it'll be like whenever, but
literally March will be when this comes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in July, but I was like, hey, it's called Future You. And what I said is we have to reverse engineer it. So we have to think, if I want to be a person who 7 years out maintains my weight loss or whatever the thing is in your community, we have to start asking. I'm always like, don't write checks that Future You's ass can't cash. You know what I mean? So I'm like, so who do I have to be right now? What decision do I have to make right now that is going to be like my future self, my future you is going to be grateful for me? It's going to be a gift to receive. So who and how I'm being right now, we can't do anything about the past. You cannot build a better past. That ship has already sailed. But who you're being right now can not only serve you and your family, your community, or whatever right now, but future you is going to look back. Like I jokingly say, I always say to myself, today me wants to thank yesterday me for making that food and having these yummy leftovers. I'm like, today me wants to make a complaint to yesterday me who thought doing that was a good idea, right? So I like to live in the present moment, but also understand that there's a place I'm trying to go. There's a thing I'm trying to do. And are the stories that I'm telling myself, how I'm holding myself right now in my mind, is it going to hinder and harm, or is it going to help me get there?
Karen, I couldn't close on a better note than that, and I want to be respectful of your time, but this is also why anytime I get in front of you, and I hope if you're still listening to this episode, you understand that Karen is truly a unique individual who gets people and knows how to help people get people. So if they're listening and they're like, I need more Karen in my life, and they should, I'm always infinitely better every time I talk to Karen than before I start the conversation. And this is no different. So Karen, where can everyone connect with you?
Sure. My website is just Karen Kenney. It's KENNEY.com. That's the easiest place to find me. You can learn about all the stuff the shenanigans I'm up to. On Instagram, it's Karen Kenney Live, LIVE. On Facebook, it's the same thing, but they can also find me at KarenKenney.writer. So I'm also a writer. And yeah, I don't really go on LinkedIn once in a blue moon, but the podcast, the Karen Kenney Show podcast, has been around for going on 7 years in March. So it's been around. There's a ton of episodes, the 300. And I'm just so glad that I remember saying to you, maybe 2 years ago, we did an Instagram live, and I said, I've got a question for you. Is that okay? And you were like, yeah. And I'm like, when are you going to do a podcast? And you were like, oh, I know. I've got a face made for radio, blah, blah, blah. You did the whole thing. And I was like, I think you should do one. And I'm just so happy that you're doing one now and that your love is continuing. That's what I say. My podcast is all about spirituality and storytelling and spreading more love. But you're out there spreading more love in the world in your own unique way too.
We're trying. And I remember that Instagram live. And I think one thing we both agree on is I'm always busy, but it doesn't mean that I don't have it on the horizon. And
for sure.
I truly believe let me get to it when we got to a good space. And I've been so proud that when it was time to start a podcast, I truly felt I knew this was a time for me to start. And when I was looking at people who I wanted to have on and connect and just have share their voice, yours was always the top choice. So I am so happy to have you on, Karen. And seriously, thank you. I'm going to close this episode out though. So All right, Busy Bariatrics. If this one hit, and it better have, because if not, you might be legally dead. Like, put your fingers on your neck, figure out if you still have a pulse, because it means it's time you need to stop collecting awareness and start applying action. Stop nodding along like the bobblehead I was with Karen, because I realized everything she said was right and true. Go rewrite your story. Put it into your tracker. Get to the gym and prove to yourself that you're coachable, consistent, capable. And hey, if this podcast has helped you in any way, the best way to support the show without spending a single dime is to just leave a 5-star rating and review. Tell me what you liked about this episode. Tell me how awesome Karen was, or tell me why I need to change my whole format on this. Either way, feedback is feedback, and I'm here for it. And as always, keep getting busy. Thanks again, Karen.
Thank you, Annie.